My father's voice had always been a sanctuary, a deep rhythmic bass that suggested the world was a solvable equation. But as he stood there in the pre-dawn light of the Walters estate, that same voice felt like a razor wire against my skin. He looked like he'd just stepped out of a private jet, his white suit defying the mud and the blood of the clearing. But those eyes, the flat abyssal black of his pupils, had swallowed the iris entirely. He didn't look like a man who had been missing. He looked like a man who had been replaced. Sasha, darling, you're shivering. It's making the emerald look a bit desperate. I didn't move. I couldn't. My fingers were still white-knuckled around the leather-bound Walters journal, the map inside feeling like a blueprint for a disaster I was already living. Behind me, I could hear Alexander's ragged breathing, the slow, wet sound of a man whose body was trying to knit itself back together after a collision with a freight train. "You're dead," I whispered, the words puffing out in a cloud of silver frost. I saw the blood in the study. I saw the signs of a struggle. You didn't just walk away. "A struggle? Please," my father said, stepping over a fallen branch with a grace that was too fluid, too synchronized. "I was simply negotiating. The Alziranis are very traditional. They believe a deal isn't sealed until someone bleeds for it. I just wasn't the one who ended up doing the bleeding." He stopped 5 feet away. The orange flame of the lantern he held didn't flicker, even as a gust of wind tore through the clearing. The whistling of the hounds in the woods intensified, and 1,000 high-pitched notes that formed a dissonant choir. They were close. They were surrounding us. "Who is the butcher?" I demanded, glancing back at the closed fissure where the giant had vanished. "He had your eyes. He had that void." "The butcher was a prototype," my father said, dismissively waving a hand. "A byproduct of the search for the cure. He had the strength, but he lacked the executive function. He was all meat and no strategy, a common flaw in the Volkovich approach." Alexander let out a low, guttural groan. He was trying to push himself up, his arms shaking, his chest a map of purple bruises and jagged cuts. He looked up at my father, and even in his broken state, the molten gold in his eyes flared with a dying heat. "Walters," Alexander rasped, "you're supposed to be the ghost." "And you, Alexander, I are supposed to be the prize," my father replied, his smile widening to reveal teeth that looked a fraction too sharp. "I must say I'm impressed. Surviving the Motherwell's resonance is no small feat. But then, you've always had a stubborn streak. It's what made the merger so attractive." "What merger?" I snapped, stepping between them. "Osric wanted to destroy us. He wanted to cull the lines." "Osric is a dinosaur playing with a chemistry set," my father said, his voice dripping with condescension. "He thinks the surge is something to be triggered and studied. He doesn't understand that it's something to be harvested. The cure isn't about stopping the werewolf myth, Sasha. It's about refining it, stripping away the animalistic chaos and keeping the alpha authority. No more full moons, no more loss of control. Just pure, an unadulterated power that looks like a CEO and acts like a god." He held out his hand. "Give me the book, Sasha. It contains the final sequence for the monolith. We're going to finish what your ancestors started." "The monolith," I repeated, my mind racing, the red X on the map. The Volkovich Tower wasn't just a corporate headquarters, it was a transmitter. "You're going to trigger the resonance citywide. Not just a resonance, a coronation. Every person with a trace of the blood will wake up. And they will look to us, the Walters, as the architects of their evolution. We won't need stock options to control the market, Sasha. We'll own the biology of the elite." I looked down at the book, then at Alexander. Alexander was watching me, a single tear of blood tracking down his temple. He didn't say a word, but I could feel his thought. It's a faint pulse against my mind. Don't do it. "And what happens to the ones who aren't alpha enough?" I asked. "What happens to the hounds, to the people who just break?" My father's black eyes didn't blink. "In any merger, there is always a bit of redundancy. We let the hounds have the streets for a night, a bit of urban renewal. By dawn, the world will be a much quieter, much more efficient place." I felt a surge of cold, sharp clarity. This wasn't the man who had taught me how to read balance sheets. This was the madness given a suit and a mission. He wasn't cured, he was colonized. "You're wrong," I said, my voice as steady as the stone well. "The merger isn't happening." My father's expression didn't change, but the air around him grew heavy, the temperature dropping until the grass beneath his feet turned white with rime. Sasha, don't be tedious. I've spent months in the shadows making sure you were ready for this. The setup with Alexander, the gala, the hunt. It was all to ensure your surge was strong enough to survive the monolith. You are my legacy. I'm not your legacy, I said, raising the book. I'm your replacement. Without a word, I turned and threw the leather-bound journal into the mother well. It was a small sound, a distant thud as it hit the dark water far below, but it echoed through the clearing like a gunshot. The silence that followed was absolute. The hounds stopped whistling, the wind stopped blowing, even Alexander seemed to hold his breath. My father's face contorted. For the first time, I saw the beast break through the pristine veneer. His jaw shifted, his skin tightening over his cheekbones until he looked like a living skull. A low, vibrating growl erupted from his throat, a sound that made the very ground beneath us tremble. That, he hissed, was a mistake. He didn't run, he blurred. He was across the clearing before I could draw a breath. He grabbed my throat with a hand that felt like cold iron, slamming me back against the stone rim of the well. The lantern fell from his other hand, shattering on the grass, the orange flame dying instantly. I can always write the sequence again, Sasha, he growled, his face inches from mine. His breath smelled of damp earth and old copper. But I can't write a new daughter. I suppose I'll just have to break you until you remember who you belong to. I clawed at his wrist, my nails, still sharp from the surge, digging into his skin. But he didn't bleed red. A thick black ichor seeped from the wounds, smelling of rot. You aren't him, I managed to choke out. I am what he became, my father said. The Alpha of the Void. He raised his other hand, his fingers elongating into those familiar obsidian points. I closed my eyes, waiting for the strike. It didn't come. A roar of pure, molten fury erupted from the grass. Alexander, fueled by some impossible reserve of adrenaline or love, had launched himself at my father's back. He didn't tackle him. He bit. Alexander's teeth sank into my father's shoulder, and the sound of the Alpha of the Void screaming was something I would never forget. It was the sound of 1,000 dying stars. The grip on my throat vanished. I slumped to the ground, gasping for air, as the two men rolled across the frost. It was a blur of black and gold, of ruined white silk and blood-soaked skin. Alexander was fighting like a man possessed, his golden eyes burning so bright they cast shadows against the trees. But my father was something else. He didn't feel pain. He didn't tire. He threw Alexander off him with a casual flick of his arm, sending him crashing into the lightning-scarred elm. Enough, my father roared. He stood in the center of the clearing, his white suit now stained with that black ichor. He looked at Alexander, then at me. He raised his hands, and the silver mist from the well began to rise again. But this time, it was turning black. If you won't lead with me, you'll die with the rest of the cattle, he said. The ground began to shake again, not a fissure this time, but a rhythmic pounding, like a giant heart beating beneath the forest. For the monolith, Alexander gasped, struggling to his feet. He looked at me, his face pale. Sasha, he doesn't need the book. He's the transmitter. He's already connected to the tower. I looked at my father. He was vibrating, his entire body humming with that same frequency Osric had used, but at a volume that was deafening. The silver eye of the moon was being eclipsed by a shadow, a dark, creeping void that started at the center and moved outward. He's triggering it now, I whispered. The city in the distance began to change. I could see the lights of the Volkovich monolith begin to pulse, a rhythmic black light that seemed to suck the color out of the horizon. Suddenly, the whistling of the hounds changed. It became a scream of agony. From the woods, the first of them emerged. They weren't hunting us anymore. They were clutching their heads, their bodies contorting in the black light. They were breaking. Sasha, we have to stop the signal, Alexander said, grabbing my hand. He looked at the well. The resonance. We can use the mother well to ground him. If we can pull him in. It'll kill him, Alexander. It'll kill whatever is left of my father. Alexander looked at me, his eyes softening. He's already gone, Sasha. That thing in the suit is just a ghost with a grudge. I looked at the man in the white suit. He was no longer human. He was a pillar of black energy, his face a mask of fanatical power. He was the end of the world. On 3, I asked, my voice trembling. On 3. We didn't run away. We ran toward the void. We hit him together, our combined surge slamming into the wall of black energy. It felt like running into a mountain of ice. My skin felt like it was being flayed, my bones vibrating until I thought they would shatter, but we didn't let go. Alexander grabbed my father's waist, his muscles screaming under the strain. I grabbed his arms, my nails sinking into that cold, black flesh. "You wanted a merger," I screamed over the roar of the resonance. "Here's your exit strategy." With a final, desperate surge of strength, we heaved. The three of us tumbled over the rim of the mother well. The fall felt like it lasted a lifetime. I saw the silver moon, the black monolith, and Alexander's face, illuminated by the gold of his eyes. And then we hit the water. It wasn't cold. It was electric. The mother well wasn't just a well. It was a conduit to the very heart of the ley line. At the moment my father's black energy touched the water, the resonance was grounded. A massive, blinding flash of white light erupted from the depths. A pillar of energy so powerful it shot straight up through the well and into the sky, shattering the black eclipse of the moon. I felt the void leave my father's body. I felt the frequency snap. And then, I felt nothing. I woke up on the grass. The sun was rising, a pale, honest gold that warmed my skin. The silver mist was gone. The frost was melting into dew. The forest felt quiet. For the first time in my life, the oscillation in my head was silent. I sat up, my head throbbing. My emerald dress was a rag, my skin covered in scratches and dried mud. "Alexander," I croaked. He was lying a few feet away, his chest rising and falling in a slow, steady rhythm. He was covered in bruises. But the gold was gone from his eyes. He looked human. He looked exhausted. He looked like the man I wanted to spend the rest of my life with. I crawled to him, taking his hand. His skin was warm, not a fever, just a normal human heat. He opened his eyes and smiled, a small, weary thing that made my heart ache. It's still here," he whispered. "We're still here." I looked at the well. It was quiet. No mist, no humming. Just an old stone structure in a peaceful clearing. "My father?" I asked. Alexander looked at the well, then back at me. He didn't have to say it. The alpha of the void was gone. I stood up, helping Alexander to his feet. We leaned on each other, two broken survivors of a war that shouldn't have existed. We started to walk toward the manor, the morning light guiding our way. But as we reached the tree line, I stopped. I looked down at the ground. There, in the soft mud of the path, was a footprint. It wasn't a human shoe, and it wasn't a clawed hound. It was a paw print, a massive, perfect wolf print, nearly the size of a dinner plate, and beside it, a smaller one. I looked at Alexander. He was staring at the prints, his face pale. "I thought we grounded the myth," he whispered. "We grounded the frequency, Alexander," I said, my heart starting to thud again. We stopped the transmitter. I looked into the woods. Deep in the shadows of the ancient oaks, a pair of eyes caught the morning light. They weren't silver. They weren't gold. They weren't black. They were green. The exact shade of my emerald dress. The wolf didn't growl. It didn't howl. It simply dipped its head in a gesture of recognition and vanished into the darkness. And then, my phone buzzed in the pocket of my ruined dress. I pulled it out, the screen cracked but still functioning. One new message, from an unknown number. "The merger is complete, Sasha, but the board isn't human anymore. See you at the office at 9 a.m. I looked at the Volkovich monolith in the distance. The black lights were gone, but the building was glowing with a soft, natural green, the same color as the eyes in the woods. I looked at Alexander. "I think we're going to be late for work," I said. Alexander didn't laugh. He looked at the woods, then at the city, then at me. "Sasha," he said, his voice trembling. "Look at your hand." I looked down. The red mark on my hand, the one from Alexander's grip, was gone. In its place, etched into my skin like a silver tattoo, was the image of a wolf's head. And beneath it, how a single word in a script that looked like ancient Latin. Alpha. I looked at Alexander's hand. He had the same mark. And as the sun fully rose over the Wolters estate, a howl erupted from the city, not a scream of agony, but a call of triumph. 1,000 voices joined in, a chorus that shook the very foundation of the world. The myth wasn't over. It had just been promoted.
Be sure to not miss episode 6, where Sasha and Alexander must navigate a corporate world where the board is now a pack, and the real struggle for the soul of the city begins. Subscribe and hit the notification bell to get notified.